Hello, everybody. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have such a big show today. I'm not going to waste any time with the whole intro. I just want to get right into it. The debate. A lot of stuff happened last night. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about some Supreme Court rulings. And I have a new piece out on Israel's possible incursion, upcoming incursion into Lebanon. So we will, just keep it simple. And we're going to get started right now. A really, really pretty historic debate last night, and it was probably the first debate in presidential history that has really, brought up questions, and some pretty serious questions among some pretty serious people in the Democratic Party. Should their presumptive nominee, Joe Biden, resign? This is after, he has this debate that he essentially, with CNN, sets up. They have almost complete control over all the rules because everyone thinks, Trump's not going to do a debate. He's saying, I'll debate, or Trump's saying, that Biden's not going to do a debate. So Biden essentially gets then to call Trump's bluff in a pretty, seemingly smart way and creates the rules, no microphone. So Trump can, do a sassy, snarky interruption, no microphone on while the other person is talking. So no interruptions, no studio audience to laugh at Trump's jokes. And no, limited, kind of staff interaction, which I don't think Biden probably, if he had his pick, would have chosen. That may have been more of a CNN one. But this kind of sets the stage for a debate where, I kind of was expecting to see Trump do a bit better than he did. He kind of, it was fine. He did do some pretty, unpopular things. He did come off as a bit of a bull. He was talking about his golf handicap and all that ridiculousness. We're not going to be able to play any or all of those, of those crazy clips from the debate, but we are going to get into some of the more ridiculous ones because however bad Trump was in terms of saying some pretty unelectable stuff, I think around abortion, around stop the steal, he did have some kind of good flips on it. Just in terms of a pure political level, and what plays well to the people in the election, not necessarily who was right, who was wrong, who has the better argument, because I think, a lot of times there, Biden did have the better argument when he was able to make it. And that kind of feeds into the problem is that Biden was fundamentally unable to make any argument. There were some times where he stated some good points. There were some times where he missed layup after layup after layup, some really good opportunities to hit Trump. And to reframe the argument around areas where he could have been more successful. I'm only going into my senior year right now in college, but I was kind of just armchair quarterbacking the debate when I was listening to it in my headphones. It was like, just go for this, say this, it'd be like, say something relatively similar but way less coherently in like a very raspy voice, and then they decided to leak after. He had a cold. And even if he didn't have a cold because he's out speaking fine the next day in North Carolina. So it was all just a bunch of just holy shit, we got to just say something. It was just absolute BS. But either way, this was some of the moments, a little bit of a montage for you. And again, if you hear some laughter in this, it means I'm just essentially ripping it directly from, Jon Stewart's show, because he obviously did a very good job of compiling some of the, highlights, shall we say, of the debate. I tried to find some of the, clips on Twitter, but this is going to be a much more kind of comprehensive version. And the one guy I could find who really did have a lot of clips was just only clipping Trump moments because he's a hardcore liberal on Twitter. But here's a little bit of a taste of what you saw last night from the Biden side.
As to not look old and not have a senior moment, go.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you.
Oh, it's like, like that is really great because you really have the Democratic faithful, Daily Show audience in the background, and they're just like, like that was just painful to watch. And he, like, I think the video makes it so much more potent because it's like you could see he's like looking downcast. There's times where he's just looking off in the other direction. He's completely positioned, towards, not even towards the monitor, because he was on the right side of that stage. And he was just facing off towards the left. So the moderators, he would have been, if he was looking out, he was on the right side of the stage, and he was looking, the moderators are kind of towards the center, so he would have had to face right, but he was just out, looking off to his left. It was completely nonsensical situation. It just looked really, really, really bad, and it's just an embarrassing moment, all around. And there is moments like this. There was a moment, so he's looking off every which way, all over the place, off in different directions. It's really looking bad. And I do want to play this, with this Jon Stewart Daily Show commentary, because boy does it hit. It hits bigly, as he would say, because this is the one moment where it's like, okay, maybe he could pull it out here, and this is how it goes.
This is the first presidential election since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade.
Oh shit, we're back, baby! Abortion, A to the B to the O to the R to the T to the repeal of Roe v. Wade. That is Trump's weakest issue.
It's been a great thing.
Oh, he is. It's a great thing. Hit him, Joey.
It's been a terrible thing, what you've done.
It's a terrible.
And by the way, this is probably the most charismatic he sounded all night.
This is awesome. We are done here. TKO. No. Joe, don't say anything else. Joey.
The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states. Let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in, they talk about that.
Like, what? How do we get from Roe v. Wade being bad, and like there was some guy who was trying to tell me that like it was something to do with Trump brought up like exceptions for rape and incest and life of the mother with regards to abortion, and like somehow maybe his brain trailed off to talking about immigration abortion. It's like, no, like this is not something that that is a very poor excuse, because I don't think immigration was really part of the equation. Because I watched the debate just like everyone else did. I go back, look at the tape, but ultimately it's like this is the clip that matters. This is what people are going to see, and the fact is that he there in a completely incoherent display somehow talked his way out of condemning Trump on one of his worst issues into his way, and talked his way into handing Trump a golden opportunity to condemn Biden on one of Biden's worst issues, which is immigration. So it's just like, it's amazing stuff. And by the way, like, of course, Trump immediately hit him on immigration.
Care about our veterans. He doesn't care. He doesn't like the military at all. Probably the worst administration in history. The worst presidency in the history of our country. This shouldn't be a debate. He is the worst president. I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
That was a really incredible moment. You could hear even the liberals laughing at that in the Daily Show audience, because it's like, I think it was like asking about immigration or like seeking asylum or something, like, and he is literally just sitting there, and it is like Trump's making fun of, like, Biden finishes another like incoherent sentence and just kind of like trails off and just like sits down and flops down and kind of gives up on the sentence. And then Trump just goes, I really don't know like what he said there. And I don't think that he knows either. Okay, folks, it's not good. He's the worst president ever. So those were some of Trump's greatest hits. He did have some kind of shakier moments when he was like, I'm going to accept the election results if it's a fair election, like essentially exactly what he said, in 2016, 2020. And it's going to be essentially the same thing. I think people do kind of know, they do kind of price it. It's like so many people hate both of these candidates, and they have so many deep fundamental flaws, both of them. I think like people are not realizing how much with both these candidates is priced in, especially with Trump, about him being kind of crazy, and the fact everyone remembers the chaos of 2020 and the whole is the election rigged? Of course, obviously it was not rigged, and the whole trying to get Trump out of there. But a lot of people, a lot of swing voters are still, especially after this performance, are leaning towards Trump anyway. And that is because the offer on the other side is doing things like that debate performance last night. It's going to happen when you're putting something up like that. Like people, despite what, the people on Twitter may say, like they don't owe any allegiance. They're not comfortable with any, loyalty to the Democratic Party. They don't have, a D, stamped onto their wrist that they have to always, it's like Voldemort's Death Eater mark. Like if you try and criticize anything against say anything against the Democratic Party, like it burns you. Like that is not how like most voters think. It's just like, Trump is absolutely crazy, but he was 4 years ago. Things were, somehow more stable under him than they are under the guy who's been a politician for 1 billion years. Like, I know he, said the election was rigged, but this guy's so old, I think he's going to die. I think we're getting into all these wars, whatever, whatever the calculation may be. My food prices are up, so I'm going to go vote for, for Donald Trump. Like, that's how, the mind of a median voter works, and because they're, looking out for them, as they should, and as we all would. And it's on the Democrats. I will always say this, and people are just hate it every time I do, that it is on the Democrats to put up a better alternative, especially, when you do have and you seriously believe that democracy is on the ballot. It's just some real delusion in this party. But I think after this, the delusion is gone. I think there were some people who legitimately thought, oh, he's fine, he's on top of it, maybe in some of the lower levels. But now, like, this delusion has been shattered. Like, we know officially now the Democrats are putting up a candidate who is just completely incompetent against a guy that they seriously believe or purport to seriously believe that is a genuine threat to democracy. And I think a lot of it's because, they're scared about what the chaos may be with a brokered convention, and they're not going to push Biden to step aside. Like, and they know what they're doing. Everyone knows what they're doing. This is what the Democratic Party has decided to put forward. Like, it is not good. It is very, very clear. Especially for people who say that they want to, go in and defeat Trump. Let's see some of the, the moments, the anti-Trump moments that, libs are kind of talking about here from, someone like Aaron Rupar. And let's see, he essentially, let's go through a good list here. Let's see, Trump, in response to a question about childcare, if he wins this election, we probably won't have a country anymore. Biden, there's a reason why we have the fastest growing country, there's something about, he tried to say some ridiculous thing Biden had about 159 presidential scholars voted him the worst presidential history in American, in the history, president in the history of the United States. Like, some Wisconsin voter or some Georgia voters can be like, 159 presidential scholars. Oh my God. Like, that is just, that is a very Democratic, like, you could see Hillary doing that just as easily. Talking about, the migrants are coming in, they're taking their schools, their hospitals. Will you take, so let's see. Let's hear some, see if we can find some January 6th stuff here. Let's see. Here we go.
Two horrible Republicans that are all gone now, out of office, and Democrats, all Democrats. They destroyed and deleted all of the information they found because they found out we were right. We were right. And they deleted and destroyed all of the information. They should go to jail for that. If a Republican did that, they'd go to jail.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, I want to give you a minute.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is...
And Trump just nods his head. He's like,
yeah,
I guess it's true.
The fact is that there was no effort on his part to stop what was going on up in Capitol Hill. And all those people, every one of those who were convicted, deserves to be convicted. The idea they...
Yeah, so that's, they're talking about, obviously, January 6th there, Trump saying that Kissinger and Cheney should be in jail. Dick Cheney should definitely be in jail. I don't know about Liz. But they do have, politically, and again, factually, are two different things. Like facts in our world, they're very, very fickle things. Like, both sides manipulate them. The Republican side obviously does, have to manipulate them more, but both sides are definitely manipulating. They went through the Biden fact check, the Trump fact check. The Trump fact check was longer, but it was a lot more kind of like you're playing to your base, you're playing to your audience, you're playing to people who are drawing the same conclusions about Joe Biden and the country under Joe Biden as you. But comparatively, if you're looking at Biden's thing, it was also very kind of similar to Biden as a candidate, because he'd say 15% when he meant 6%. He'd say 200 when he meant 2,000. Like, he'd be getting the numbers wrong. And I think that, that is very, very telling. The January 6th situation, it's like, he said on January 6th we had a secure border. In January 6th we had a strong economy. That was I'm sorry, that was a pretty good subject change. Like, it's a, it's a disgraceful thing to kind of change the subject about, but is that going to, help him with voters who are just like, is it the best way he could have handled that situation? Honestly, I think it is, because it's reminding voters of, a perceived time when they're like, okay, things are a little bit less chaotic, a little less out of control, which just almost seems pretty crazy under the Trump administration, under COVID. But that is, his best strength, what he's trying to play to. And, again, let's look back here again at what Trump said there in the beginning.
The Unselect Committee, which is basically two horrible Republicans that are all gone now, out of office, and Democrats, all Democrats, they destroyed and deleted all of the information they found, because they found out we were right. We were right. And
he's talking about the way January 6th happened. It's like, that is, to me, that's another way, just you're muddying the waters, you're talking around it, but no one really knows what you're saying. So again, it's something that Trump's used very, very many times, just to say things that sound kind of vaguely serious and tone darkly, when just nothing is behind it. But again, it's still politically is a lot better than anything that Trump would have, or what Biden put on last night, which is just complete incoherence. So since then, it has been kind of a wild ride. So we have just essentially some of the latest updates. This is where we are right now. Reaction to the first presidential debate dominated the political world Friday, with President Trump taking a victory lap at a Virginia rally as President Biden and his surrogate sought to contain the damage from his shaky performance Thursday night. So this is essentially how it played out after the debate. And we could really see some pretty remarkable stories. This is, for example, this is Rachel Maddow's reaction to the Biden-Trump debate.
And that is the first presidential debate of the 2024 election cycle at a very unusual time with very unusual format. And I think with probably strange results. We'll see the response from both sides. But if you're the Biden campaign, I think you wish that this night will be remembered in reverse, as the president became sort of stronger, including his voice, the strength of his voice over the course of the night, probably peaking towards the very, very end of the debate. For the Trump campaign, I think it's fair to say it was the inverse. President Trump, just in terms of his coherence and finishing a sentence and seeming to be in control of his own emotions, started off
How is this a country that we're in right now?
The strongest point for him was at the very beginning of the debate, and then it over the course.
Yeah, so that was Rachel Maddow's reaction there, trying to throw a little bit of cope. But there really are some pretty, Nicole Wallace was openly talking about, the Democrats trying to pull, the text that she was getting. John King was waving up his phone on CNN. Like, this has been buzzing off the charts with people freaking out. There was essentially one my personal favorite quote from a Joe Biden or Democratic source was like, I picked a bad time. This is a direct quote. I picked a bad time to stop sniffing glue. It's like, you could say that again. So reaction to the first presidential debate dominated the world on Friday. Democratic leaders have publicly backed Biden. And this was after kind of like a slow draw, absolute freak out over the night. Probably, all night, people staying up, texting, what is this going to be? are we going to do anything about this? And Democrats being Democrats, because they're a little bit delusional and they're definitely scared of, their own shadow when it comes to doing something really, really dramatic in a, kind of tight political situation like this. They were pretty much over time, I'd say probably by 9 or 10, Hakeem Jeffries started to come out, leader of the House on the Democratic side, and say, Joe Biden shouldn't resign. Nancy Pelosi started to say it. Barack Obama recently put out a tweet, and that was kind of the death knell of, Democratic officials slowly coming out and saying, Jim Clyburn was another instance. So, there was reporting saying, he was jogging away from reporters earlier in the morning, but by around noon, he was like, okay, we're going to have Joe Biden stick with this. Obama offered a strong statement of support for the former vice president. A wide range of lawmakers, activists, and pundits publicly discussed replacing him on the top of the ticket, which is a really, quite a strong step. And it is a different situation than having a bad debate, as Barack Obama said. This is the kind of delusion that Democrats are going to have to deal with. I think they're being a little bit delusional. Well, only the polls and the direction of the race in the next few days will tell for sure. But essentially, what Democrats are doing is they're saying, Biden had a bad debate. They're coming out and they're admitting it. Kamala Harris in the spin room was like, it was a slow start but a strong finish. To have the own vice president say that about the sitting president in a debate is really, really shocking and a sign of just how indefensible that debate performance was. But they're saying it's only June. People are going to start, the same dynamic that was, the race was tightening because people were fearful of Trump. That's going to step back in. It's going to become more of a serious issue. And, people are going to, have this fade back into the rearview mirror. It was just one bad night. And again, what a lot of people, I think I tend to fall on this side, on the other side of it, say this wasn't just one bad night. This was 50 million people watched this. At least when it was happening. Many millions more obviously watched it on, in the clips or, in the news coverage. They found out about it. Like, this was a very public stage and it's been covered really badly in even all the places. Like, local news is covering it, pretty accurately. And when I say badly, badly for Biden, so I mean accurately. Many, many different types of Americans all over the country today are looking at this, and they're essentially seeing that, this did not go well for Joe Biden. And not only did not go well, Trump beat him on the policy or some kind of, vaguer thing like that. He was, and they see all these calls coming out, from the Democrats confirming what has always been, ever since 2022, or probably honestly earlier, the biggest concern for voters have about Joe Biden, which has been his age, his competency, his fitness to run, and all of that stuff. So some urge Biden to step aside to allow a new candidate to ascend to the convention. But on Friday, the director of communication for the Biden campaign said there are no internal conversations about replacing Biden on the ticket whatsoever. Trump on the debate right from the start of a roughly 90-minute campaign rally in Chesapeake, Virginia on Friday afternoon hit him pretty hard. He said, "Hello, Virginia. Did anybody last night watch a thing called The Debate?" Maybe I should stop doing my Trump impersonation. Trump said, "The question voters should be asking themselves today is not whether Joe Biden can survive a 90-minute debate performance, but whether America can survive 4 more years of crooked Joe Biden in the White House." Honestly, I think you should ask Americans, do you really think Biden can make it 4 years? Come on, vote for a guy who at least can make it all 4 years. It's just so depressing that that's where we're at this level of the country, and it feels like it's just surreal. But that honestly probably would be a startlingly effective line. Biden gave an energetic speech, relative to his debate performance at an afternoon rally, meanwhile, in Raleigh, as he sought to dispel widespread panic among Democrats about his debate performance. He said, "I know I'm not a young man to state the obvious," Biden told a very enthusiastic crowd, "but I know what I know. I know how to tell the truth. I know how to do this job." He said, "I can't talk that well. I can't debate that well. I can't, but I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. I know how to do the job," essentially was the full quote. he's also going to be at Stonewall Inn in Manhattan's West Village later tonight. But even as Democratic leaders pledged confidence in Biden on Friday, pundits and political strategists openly expressed doubt in his ability to see the election through, in some cases calling for a new nominee. And if you look at the opinion columnists of the New York Times, that's what really caught my eye. You got Nick Kristof, Frank Bruni, Tom Friedman, the really ardent Biden defenders who are just like, this is time to go. Joe Scarborough coming out saying it's time to go. Like, it was a really, really bad performance for a lot of people. But I think the bed has been made up till this point. Like, they put, there was a real sense last night that we're in uncharted territory. We don't know what could happen. This could really be a historic moment. We could see, a 9 a.m. speech tomorrow where Biden's, looking all serious, being like, I've decided not to seek a new term of this nomination. Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama all called him in the night, telling him to stand down. That has not happened. He is in it to win it, which is like, I guess, but it is really not going to be a easy road to hoe. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how these, there's some early polling that has said, the debate performance didn't really shift my vote too much. It was about 15-20% of people said that it really did shift their vote. But that's this kind of flash polling stuff. We're going to have to wait over the next few days for the larger sample size polls, the more accurate pollsters to come out, especially in the swing states, to see, is this going to be really bad? Another key thing to look for is the Senate versus the president polls in these key swing states where you have a senator trying to protect their seat. If you start to see, John Tester, Jackie Rosen, Mark Kelly in Arizona, Jackie Rosen in Nevada, start to run, that gap, pretty healthy gap they had, that 5-6 point gap with the president, if that starts to close and the president starts dragging him down, then you could see some real problems again. It all depends how much this debate, how much Joe Biden, the acting president, going out on the stage and looking like the way he did, with just no control over what he was saying, no control over his own functions, and seeing that so clearly represented on all the networks, 51 million people watched it as it was happening. It's going to be really the biggest test now is how that sinks in. The Democratic Party has already decided to just rub it off, pretend like it didn't happen, but will the American electorate force them to come back to reality? That is what we shall see. Okay, so we don't got a lot of time left, but we're going to kind of move through here. This is in the New Republic by Kate Aronoff. She said, it's hard to overstate how bad this week has been for, among many other things, as we just talked about, environmental regulations. On their own, the Supreme Court's rulings on either Ohio versus EPA or Loper Wright Enterprises versus Raimondo would be bad news. Together, they spell out a new reality where our country's robed clerics, again, this is a very Iranian supreme leader, top council style, guaranteed employment until death, have final say over whether government agencies can do their jobs. On Thursday, justices ruled in favor of Ohio and several other states that challenged the Environmental Protection Agency's plan to bring them into compliance with ozone pollution control requirements. The justices' ruling allows the EPA's plan to remain paused as the states challenge the proceedings through the courts. Laying out the context for the decision, Neil Gorsuch, who authored the majority opinion, noted the EPA set as its target the reduction of emissions of one ozone precursor, in particular nitrous oxide. Going on to explain, the agency sought to impose nitrous oxide emissions control measures that maximize cost effectiveness. Nitrous oxide is a colorless, odorless gas used for sedation and pain relief, commonly referred to as laughing gas, and it's administered by dentists. It's also a greenhouse gas and ozone precursor that can be generated by industrial activity, because it's presumably meant to refer to nitrogen oxide, the broader category of nitrogen-oxygen compounds that the EPA is trying to write and regulate through the Good Neighbor Plan. In total, Gorsuch, writing on behalf of the court's conservative majority, mistakenly referred to nitrous oxide rather than nitrogen oxide 5 times in his decision. It's an easy enough mistake to make. I've written about nitrogen oxide, Kate says, in a small handful of times insofar as they relate to federal environmental regulations, and had to look them up again to write the story. Like most people and most judges, Gorsuch does not have a specialized knowledge of chemistry or environmental science. His expertise is a fairly conventional one for a Supreme Court justice. Georgetown friends to Columbia, then off to Harvard Law, capped off by a PhD in jurisprudence from Oxford. Despite these credentials, Gorsuch seemingly did not look closely enough at the documents to get the name of the chemical compound in question right. He didn't Google it. Opinions are circulated multiple times among the justices before being released to the public, and none of them or their clerks seem to catch the mistake either. And this is kind of concerning because it foreshadows the Chevron doctrine. This is the Loper-Bright versus Raimondo case to overturn something called the Chevron doctrine or Chevron deference, which granted, past tense, federal agencies the authority to interpret laws that Congress passes. In one fell swoop, Justice Elena Kagan summarized in her dissent, the majority today gives exclusive power over every open issue, which, again, the Supreme Court majority, no matter how expertise-driven or policy-laden, involving the meaning of regulatory law. So essentially giving these six, this crazy conservative Christian majority, the power to determine the structure of the court. Somehow, here's how the Chevron doctrine is supposed to work. Sometimes Congress will use language that says, put together a system that requires companies to install systems of pollution control. Some have Sankar, Senior Vice President for Programs at environmental law firm Earth Justice, told me by phone, what does system mean? What Chevron said was, when that comes up, the agency gets to take a shot at explaining what system means. When a judge isn't sure of what something means, the judge refers to the agency's definition. By removing Chevron, Justice Roberts is saying, when you see that word system, judge, you've got to figure out what that means. And, I think the people paying for their vacations, shall we say, will get a pretty big say in that when push comes to shove. Even members of Congress, they have things like the Congressional Research Service. So this is a really, this is a very, serious, kind of thing, because it does have pretty massive implications for the shape of pretty much all regulations. We're talking about environment, we're talking about health, we're talking about workplace, all these different things with the NLRB, like all these kind of, in some way, vague regulations, they're now going to be determined by John Roberts and his 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court. And again, by the way, Elena Kagan, if you're listening to this, Sonia Sotomayor, please retire, please, come on. Anyway, but that's not the only thing the Supreme Court has been up to. The Supreme Court has on Friday upheld Oregon's ban, it's today by the way, on homeless residents from sleeping outdoors, a decision likely to reverberate beyond the West Coast as cities across the country grapple with a growing homelessness crisis. Gorsuch, writing for a conservative supermajority, found that the ordinances passed in Grants Pass, Oregon, did not violate the Constitution's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. The measures penalize sleeping and camping in public places, including sidewalks, streets, and city parks. I believe also even in the cars. Gorsuch said that this did not criminalize the homeless, but rather the act of camping outdoors. It makes no difference whether the charged defendant is currently a person experiencing homelessness, a backpacker on vacation, or a student who abandons his dorm room to camp out in protest on the lawn of a municipal building. Would you look at that? So there's a little, kind of anti-Palestinian protest just shoved in there as well. In her dissent, Sonia Sotomayor, Justice Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson with decision would leave society's most vulnerable with fewer protections. So it's like if you're homeless, you don't get criminalized. But when you try and sleep in a place that isn't your home, which is outside, that's when you get criminalized. It's like, but yeah, again, we're not criminalizing homelessness. Come on, like, what are you, crazy? Like, it is just spitting in your face, exercising naked conservative power, and calling it, smart jurisprudence. Like, it is a joke. Again, like, obviously here, Sonia Sotomayor stating the blatant obvious. Sleep is a biological necessity, not a crime, Sotomayor wrote. For some people, sleeping outside is their only option. That the local laws impose fines and potential jail time for people sleeping anywhere in public at any time, including in their cars, if they use as little as a blanket to keep warm or a rolled-up shirt as a pillow, effectively punishes people for being homeless. This is unconscionable and unconstitutional, Justice Sotomayor said in her reading her dissent from the bench, a rare move that signals profound disagreement. Like, oh, again, two brutal blows here, from the Supreme Court. No other way to say it. Now to our last story, and it's by me in Vantage Points. That's vantages.substack.com if you want to go check out the full new article. And we're talking about today the tensions in Lebanon rising from a kind of distant conflict Americans only hear about once in a while to an all-out war threatening to involve American troops as Israel flirts with a second front in the north against Iran-backed Lebanese resistance group Hezbollah. A lengthy drone reconnaissance video released by Hezbollah showing potential targets in the critical port of Haifa was the latest provocation in a slow-boiling tit-for-tat between Israel and Lebanese group that began the day after the October 7th attacks. The back and forth, understandably, has been characterized as a sideshow compared to the genocide in Gaza, but it has not been insignificant. It's kind of been going on for a while now. Israel even accused of using white phosphorus. Again, we talked about recently their approved invasion plans, but now that this is looking pretty much ever more likely, and there's a report in the Huffington Post essentially saying that Biden's resigned to this at this point, which is really pretty shocking. It's kind of disturbing and in frighteningly disturbing and frighteningly easy to imagine how this would play out. Israel, with the endless spigot of U.S. weapons, bolstering their own well-developed arms industry, launches an all-out assault on Lebanon as a country. While Hezbollah targets are going to come under fire for sure, Benny Gantz, the so-called moderate cabinet minister, promised to wipe out the Lebanese power grid in a matter of days. They're also setting up that Telegraph story alleging, anonymously, weapons in the Beirut airport. Why do you think that's there? It's a justification to bomb. Same way, there's tunnels under the El Shifa hospital. That's going to revoke a massive response from Hezbollah. Biden will have to get involved. It's going to hurt his favorability rating on the Middle East yet again. Trump comes in, and they resolve this thing pretty quickly and pretty easily. It is not... It is not the best. It is definitely not the best. I will say that. So it is a very horrific situation. It's kind of it's a horrific hypothetical. It would be an absolute disaster for the people of Gaza and Lebanon. But with hundreds of thousands dead, countless buildings destroyed, and an increasingly bellicose rhetoric between the two sides, fueled by Biden's utter refusal to check Israel in any way, a catastrophic regional war seems more likely by the day, and Biden is content to do literally nothing but sit back and watch it happen. All right. So we got for you guys today. We're back on Monday. It's Newsflash.